And now for our roundtable, or I'll call it roundtable remote for now, with Mariana Mancuso and Brian Crowley. The Florida unemployment system being called the worst in the nation, huge fallout. Fingers are being pointed, even by some longtime Republicans, at then Governor Rick Scott for gutting the system of resources and money. Talk about the fallout, including the political fallout, Brian.
Well, Florida Republicans own this. Over the last 10 years, they gutted the system. They made it very difficult for people who are unemployed to collect unemployment. We have some of the worst benefits in the country. And now the system is crashing because they didn't want to invest in a system. They simply didn't believe in unemployment benefits. And now Ron DeSantis inherits what Rick Scott and the previous legislatures have done. But Ron DeSantis was also part of the Republican Party of Florida that accepted this idea of unemployment. So he owns it as much as Rick Scott does.
Mariana, does this resonate in the fall?
Yes, because in the fall, I think people are still going to be unfortunately out of work. We have not begun to see the ramifications of the economy as a result of this pandemic. And the fact that so many Floridians are waiting for unemployment benefits during this difficult time is absolutely atrocious.
Governor DeSantis said it's a priority now. He's put a new man in charge. But again, as I'm reading this week, some Republicans are saying in an election year where people are going to start drawing lines from A to B to C, it certainly doesn't help the cause for the moment.
This has been a little bit of the Republican Party philosophy about Medicaid and about a whole lot of things that help people that are in need. They've been very generous to corporations and to big businesses. And, now they're finding out that you need the fire department year round, not when there's just a fire.
Is this a crisis that is a turning point in Florida for citizen voter expectation for what the social safety net should look like, what we're willing to put into that social safety net, what we're willing to put in terms of tax dollars to pay for it? How does it change the entire discussion for all of us from a health, employment point of view and for our Florida political class? Mariana, we'll begin with you on that one.
Well, Michael, I think you hit the nail on the head, right? You're saying that there needs to be a safety net. And the reality is unfortunately, we're in free fall and nobody recognizes that there was no safety net in place. And now we're trying to put together something last minute with duct tape and hope that it works. And I think that this, unfortunately, has become a bipartisan issue where people are not working together. And people will not forget this. Oftentimes, the electorate has a very short memory, but this is something that is sure to continue as we move forward into November.
Brian, do you believe it's a turning point in the discussion of expectations in Florida, where many people have flocked as a low-tax state, but this health crisis is changing the paradigm on all of our discussions? What is your early perception on that, Brian?
Well, I think that a few things have happened that will at least cause some conversation. If you didn't belong for Disney World, for example, Walt Disney World, the first people they laid off or furloughed were those who did not belong to the union. And then to lay off the rest of the workers, they had to negotiate with the union, which meant those workers got more rights and more opportunities. A lot of people got unemployed, suddenly found themselves without health insurance. That raises the whole question of universal health care. And what do you do about people who, through no fault of their own, who have worked hard all their lives, but are suddenly out of work because of the pandemic or 2008? And it also says a lot about how, does government care about business, which they need to a certain level, or do they care about the individual citizens of Florida? And let me just add as an aside, is in the middle of trying to deal with this pandemic, and I think people are doing the best they can in Tallahassee, but I hope there's a separate task force that's also looking at the possibility of a major hurricane hitting during hurricane season in the middle of this pandemic. We can't wait till it's over. So there should be a task force right now looking at what we should be doing in the event of a hurricane.
And indeed, they're already talking about that in Tallahassee, and all of us are saying every prayer we know to keep the hurricanes away. Testing, and more testing. The need for it to be more broad-based, more comprehensive. That is a huge debate in Florida right now, as it is the nation, even as the governor talks about his reopening Florida task force. Talk about the shape of that debate and how it's exposing political and philosophical fault lines in Florida. Mariana, let's begin with you.
Well, I would really hope that when we talk about wanting to reopen the state of Florida, that we would actually focus on the problems at hand. Like you said, we need more testing. You can't just willy-nilly open the state of Florida and think that everyone can go and resume their normal life. There will be a new normal, and what that looks like is first going to require a lot of testing to understand who's been infected, who's susceptible, and who's asymptomatic. And until we get that under control, reopening Florida to everybody and their mom is not necessarily going to be a recipe for success.
And yet, Brian, we're seeing here and elsewhere around the country a very robust debate protest in front of many state capitals, or several, I should say. The president's weighed in on this last week, talking about liberate places like Virginia and so on and so forth in Michigan. It's a debate that's not going away. And for people who say, I need to get back to work, that's one part of the divide. It's not as though they don't care about health. And the people who say it needs to be about health first, it's not as though they don't care about their jobs. It's a tough debate, but it is exposing some fractures here.
Well, I think that if you opened up Florida tomorrow, or even at the end of May, I think a lot of people still aren't going to go to the restaurant. I think they're still not going to do things where large groups of people gather. I think there'll certainly be, like at least some percentage of Floridians, this sense of caution until they feel like the virus is under control, until they feel like, as they wait for a vaccination or other cures for the virus. I think there'll be, I don't know. The folks that I talk to, when I ask them that question, they say, I'm not in a hurry to go to the restaurant, even if they lifted the sanctions. And I think there'll be a lot of that.
And indeed, polls right now suggest many Americans are saying be cautious, but it's a very fine line. It's a tightrope that is being walked right now. As you all are out and about, what's top of mind politically for you right now, Mariana, as you look now, as you look down the road, as you look at this as a test for leadership, and of course, what it will say about the shape of our politics in the months to come and as we point to November?
In terms of what's top of mind for me is paying attention to what the experts are saying, taking my cues from their leadership. The reality is we have as a state and as a nation fumbled drastically and consistently as we've watched our elected officials struggle to come up with a response to this. And right now I'm focusing on paying attention to the experts and the scientists in this, and I would encourage everyone to do that as well.
Brian, your thoughts. Again, I say it all the time. You have covered politics in the state for decades. What is your sense of what you're hearing out there? What's top of mind for you as the entire nature of the debate we're having about leadership, about politics, about who's in, who's out, about where we should go, how we do that, how we serve the communities? What are you hearing? What are you thinking?
Well, there's been obviously there's, President Trump has been a bit erratic in the things that he said about this virus, yet the people who are very loyal to him, the polls, yes, I'm talking about polls as much as I hate them, that, suggest that his numbers haven't dropped all that much. You have Mitch McConnell deciding that states should declare bankruptcy rather than get federal dollars. He's very eager to give federal dollars to corporations, but he doesn't want to help out the states. I think a lot of people are looking at this stuff and they're sort of shrugging and in wonderment about what's going on. And I think as this plays out in the months to come, it's going to have a huge impact on the presidential election. The flip side of all that is it's hard for Joe Biden to break out of all this noise about the virus right now.
Very, very briefly, Brian, great so far. Today, the man in charge, the man we're looking to at those state briefings, Governor Ron DeSantis. How do you grade everything so far?
The real test of leadership is when there's a crisis, and I think that he has struggled in dealing with this. He's made some mistakes, but then again, I'm not surprised. He's never been in an executive position before. I also have, when it came to unemployment, he got rid of the guy who was in charge of it because he didn't feel like he was acting fast enough. He started this reopen committee and just gave them a few days to, make some decisions about how to go forward. There's been some mistakes with that. For example, the second largest industry in Florida is agriculture. He didn't bother to appoint the Commissioner of Agriculture to the reopen committee because he was playing politics. But I think overall, I'd give him a C+.
Very quickly, Marianne, your grade?
I would have to agree with Brian. I think in times of crisis is when we need leadership the most. What we don't need is a governor who's taking his cues from the White House.
Thank you both very much. We'll have your closing comments in just a moment.